Good evening.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to tonight's public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2024-25 budget. There are two items on our agenda for this evening. The public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget, which will include presentations on both the school and town budgets from the Board of Education and First Selectmen, respectively, and public forum where the public will have an opportunity to address the Board of Finance and comment on the proposed budgets for up to a maximum of 3 minutes. We are in a hybrid meeting format, with members of the public both here in person and joining us virtually through Zoom. Currently, everyone on Zoom has been placed on mute to limit any unintended noise distractions. When presentations are completed and speaking opportunities arise, we will individually unmute those who wish to ask questions or comment, but ask that members of the public, should they want to speak, use the raise hand function to identify themselves. I'll address that a little bit more shortly. Before we begin the presentations, I'd like to make some brief opening remarks and provide an overview of tonight's format and proceedings. First, thank you to First Selectman Matthew Hoey and the Board of Selectmen, to Superintendent Dr. Paul Freeman, Chairwoman Dr. Katie Balistraci and the Board of Education, town and school administration and staff, department heads, and to the hundreds of volunteers who compose our town commissions and boards and have worked on these budgets since the fall of 2023. Second, if you are in attendance tonight in person, virtually on Zoom, or watching at home at a later time, thank you for being part of this budget process, whether through active or passive participation. This hearing is focused on all of you, Guilford residents and community members, to assist in educating and informing you on what is contained in these budgets, how your money is being spent, and how these budgets will affect all of our bottom lines. For several months, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education have been developing these budgets. In addition, as you will most likely hear mentioned several times tonight and Thursday night, the Board of Finance has been part of several meetings and workshops with both boards going back to mid-November. The presentations we are about to hear were presented to the Board of Finance at our last meeting on February 15th, and we are already aware of the content of these budgets. However, we will have a chance during our Thursday night budget workshop and possibly tonight to ask further questions and details about these budgets as needed before the Board of Finance moves a budget forward to the Guilford voters at our town meeting on Tuesday, April 2nd, and referendum on Tuesday, April 16th. Our format for tonight will be as follows. The presentation of the proposed Board of Education fiscal year 2024-2025 budget will be made by Superintendent Dr. Paul Freeman and Board of Education Chairwoman Dr. Katie Balistraci. Upon completion of the presentation, we will allow the public in attendance to ask questions by raising either their physical or virtual hand. If in person, please come up to the front, state your name and address, and be as clear and concise with your question as possible so the microphones in the room and those on Zoom can pick you up. If virtually, we will unmute you and again, state your name and address and be as clear and concise with your question as possible. If there are minimal public questions, there will be an opportunity for Board of Finance members to ask questions, but I would remind my colleagues that the Board of Finance workshop on Thursday will also allow ample time for questioning. Next, the presentation of the proposed town fiscal year 2024-2025 budget and revenue projections will be made by First Selectman Matt Hoey. Upon completion of the presentation, we will follow the same format as noted earlier for public questions. After both presentations have been made and the question and answer period is complete, I will recap the night and set the stage for our workshop deliberations on Thursday evening. Finally, we will end the night with public forum to allow members of the public to address the Board of Finance regarding the budgets presented this evening. All speakers must state their name and address, as I stated before, and limit comments to no more than 3 minutes. With that, shall we begin? Let's begin with the presentation of the proposed Board of Education fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. Superintendent Dr. Paul Freeman and Board of Education Chairwoman Dr. Katie Balistraci. Thank you both.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me just start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Freeman to go into detail. So the Board of Education received Dr. Freeman and the administration's draft budget at the beginning of January. We spent the month of January deliberating on this budget, reviewing this budget. We held public forums on Monday, January 22nd, and Tuesday, January 23rd, in order to allow the public to share with us the input, answer questions, and provide them with the opportunity to ask for considerations. We also received a number of emails throughout the month and other communications. The budget that was presented to us was $72,418,151 and represented a 5.46% increase. As has been our experience over many years, this budget came to us very thoughtfully and carefully constructed, both by administrators throughout Guilford Public Schools, overseen and led by Dr. Freeman. We gave it careful consideration, found very few places where we felt like there could be movement or decreases, but with the taxpayers and the community in mind, this community that in so many ways supports Guilford Public Schools, not only financially, but in the many ways they volunteer in our school system, lend their talent, their time, and their energy, but also attending the many athletic and musical and theatrical events that are put on. So on February 5th, the Board of Ed, again, after careful deliberation, reduced the draft budget that came to us by $261,000 and presented to the Board of Finance a budget in the amount of $72,157,151, currently representing a 5.08% increase. I'm going to ask Dr. Freeman to present to all of you a summary of what is included in that budget. Again, we feel really confident in what we are putting forth to both the Board of Finance and the town, and ask for your careful consideration. I will note in detail as we wrap up what we're seeing in terms of increases that are being put forward by other districts, and I can assure you that what we're putting in here is very similar to what is being experienced by boards of ed across the state. We are impacted by inflation, by supply chain, by increased needs of students, and this budget is going to reflect some of that. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Freeman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balistraci, and thank you, Board of Finance, again, for the opportunity to present this budget to all of you. Dr. Balistraci mentioned some of the foundational pieces that go into the budget, so I won't spend any time on this other than to remind the board and the community that this budget is built on our Portrait of the Graduate that describes and defines what we expect for every child as they spend 13 years moving through and then graduating from our school system. It is built on a number of budget assumptions that we've discussed with you in previous meetings. Essentially, these boil down to the fact that we focus on safety and wellness in our schools. We focus on instruction and learning in our schools. We expect to extend and improve the opportunities that we offer every year in our school system, and that we don't come before this board or this town asking for new resources before we explore the resources that are currently allocated. And this budget is built on our enrollment. We look every year at the number of students we project to have in front of us, and you will note here that essentially enrollment remains relatively flat this year. I will also invite board members and the community to please visit our public schools website, and there is our latest demographic study, which projects enrollment across the next 10 years for our school system. All of that being said, as Dr. Balistraci noted, the budget that we bring before you is a budget of $72,157,151. That is an increase over the current year's budget of $3,490,979, or an increase of 5.08%. Putting that in context, and I spent some time talking about this at the last meeting. I again won't go at length, but we will note that this is a significant increase. It's the second highest increase in the last 13 years. It comes as the third year of significant increase. It follows, however, a six-year period where increases were below or significantly below 2%. And there are a number of reasons, some of which Dr. Balistraci already mentioned, which feed into that increase that we present tonight. Before explaining those pressures on the budget, those cost drivers on the budget, however, we do want to take a moment to remind the board and the community of the efficiencies that we recognize in this budget. Special education is a significant cost driver in public education budgets. It is driving budgets across the country, and in Guilford, we're proud of the work that we have put into special education. We still spend a significant amount of money each year in this part of our program. The board is aware that over the last 10 or 12 years, we've been moving significant special education programs back to Guilford, and we have built out an in-district support system now for students from birth to 3 all the way to age 22. And we can support almost all of our students in the Guilford Public Schools. We have reduced the number of outplacements because of this work. That reduces tuition payments that leave Guilford and go to other schools, but it also, and more importantly, improves the services that we provide, because we do best for our students, and it's best when they receive those students in their home community. Medical spending, which was a driving force in the last 2 years' budgets, has offered a bit of relief in this budget. That's not something that we can plan on counting on year over year, but this year it does provide us some relief in the budget that we bring to you. This year we are proud of the fact that we present a budget that brings full-time instructional coaching in the area of math and STEM instruction into every one of our schools K through 6. And we achieve that without asking for additional resources in this budget. We do that by reallocating existing positions, focusing less on a district specialist model and more on a building base and teacher-focused model. But we're excited to make that change this year, and we're excited to do it without requesting new resources. And then additionally, every year we need to take a moment to thank the principals and the teachers and the parents of our students in Guilford, because we maintain reasonable, if not frugal, levels of material and equipment spending in our schools. And we do that in large part because the principals watch the spending, because the teachers are creative, and because the parents are generous in sending students in Guilford to schools with most of the materials that they require. This is a brief illustration of special education spending over the last several years, and I would note that from school year 17-18 to school year 21-22, we really leveled and managed that spending. Now, over the last 3 years, we've seen an increase in special education spending again. That is in large part to changing mandates at the state level, to a changing age in which students graduate out. Students now do not graduate out of the Guilford Public Schools, or they don't age out of the Guilford Public Schools until the end of the school year in which they turn 22. That's a significant change, and it's significantly responsible for some of the uptick that you see at the tail of this chart. I mentioned medical spending. You'll see how in the last 2 years we absorbed first a $1.5 million increase and then an $800,000 increase in medical insurance spending. And then you'll note again how this year we see some relief, and it has dropped back to a level that we had not seen in some years. I talked about the pressures on our budget. I talked about the non-discretionary cost drivers. Dr. Balistraci mentioned the impact of simple cost increases. There are 6 items that are significantly driving the cost of this budget. The first, and appropriately, is salaries. Now, this is the salary increase that we recognize before we talk about any of the investment positions on the next slide. If we simply took our existing employees today and rolled them forward into next year's budget, we would be recognizing an increase of close to $1.7 million. Now, that is being impacted by the teacher shortage. We have negotiated a new teacher contract that we begin to recognize in this budget year that has significant teacher increases. Those are both justified and necessary. If we want to continue to have the best teachers in Connecticut, we need to offer competitive salaries. Additionally, part of the salary increase is that we are seeing shortages around substitutes and have had to try to encourage and grow our substitute pool, and we're using substitutes more often than we had been previously. So there is a number of factors that are going into this salary increase. Our budget is made up primarily of salaries. We are a people-dependent organization. We rely on our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, our monitors, our clerical positions, our lunch servers. We're a people organization. Additionally, we're recognizing an increase of approximately $500,000 in transportation costs. Transportation costs continue to go up, so while we are in a really favorable contract for overall transportation costs, they are increasing this year, and we are seeing more significant increases in special education transportation as well. We're seeing some increased spending in athletic transportation because of a bus driver shortage. We have struggled to cover transportation to and from athletic events this year, and so there are additional dollars in that line to meet all of those needs. While I mentioned that we are controlling tuition costs, and while we're proud of the work we're done, we still have some students whose needs need to be met by placing them in schools outside of the Guilford Public Schools. All of those schools are increasing their costs. We're seeing some increase in the number of students who are being outplaced in such a manner, and so there are tuition increases. Contracted services are services that we bring into the school system. Those are primarily made up of services that we bring in to support many special education students who we do keep in district, as well as some other miscellaneous contracted services. The costs from all of those providers are increasing this year. Software is going up this year. This is in part the impact of inflation on the software contracts that we carry, but it also includes some expanded software, including softwares into the security side of our program, and we see those as important and necessary investments. And then the cost of electricity is going up. These 6 items alone represent an increase of $2.6 million in our budget. If we only brought forward a budget that included these items, we'd be looking at an increase in 3.7%. And as we've told you before, and as we've shared in the past, we're not bringing forward a budget that only has those items. So additionally, this budget does include investments into the school system and into the program. We mentioned at our last visit with you that these investments may look significant this year, but many of these were deferred over the last 2 years as we recognized the increases of medical costs. So as we addressed that medical cost and knew that we were still looking at 4% and 5% increases, we held off on making some investments that this year we are bringing forward. I will note that the first 4 are positions that already exist in the school district. The full-time social worker at the district level and the full-time school psychologist at the district level have been in the district for 3 years now, and those salaries have been paid by the ESSER grant. The ESSER grant dollars are running out this year. We do not feel ready to release those positions. We still see a need for those positions, and to carry them forward, that means we now need to build them into the operational budget. The kindergarten position and the special ed position you see at the top of this list were not in this year's budget, but they were both put in late August, early September of this school year, as we saw enrollment exceed what we had projected, and we needed to add a kindergarten section at Lakes and a special education teacher at Baldwin to support the students who were coming into the schools. So to stay at the current staffing level where we are today, those 4 positions need to be built into this proposed budget for next year. Additionally, beyond that, we're adding a partial health and PE position at the high school. We will be adopting a new wellness curriculum at district-wide at the high school level that will be requiring more wellness classes, and that will require an expansion of the staff who are both PE and health certified. At Adams Middle School this year, we would like to bring on a drama teacher, and that is part of a building out of the elective programs so that at Adams Middle School, students will have a greater opportunity to choose to select the electives that they would like to build into their schedule as our high school students do, rather than simply assigning them into electives in the way we do at the elementary school. So this would be an expansion of that program. There's an additional school psychologist position that is needed at Lakes Elementary School. I will remind this board and the community that Lakes Elementary School, while having the largest K through 4 population of any of our neighborhood schools, also currently houses 2 district-wide special education programs. The preschool program has been housed at Lakes historically, and one of the first of those in-house, in-district programs that we have built out is a special education program specifically focused at students who may have behavioral challenges at the youngest grades, and that has been housed at Lakes now for the last 8 or 9 years. And so not only does it have the largest population overall, but it also has a significant special education population, and we have need for that additional school psychologist position there, as well as a part-time position at Adams Middle School, again, to meet the needs of our special education students. I spoke last time, and I'll mention again, that a significant portion of this year's budget, a significant part of this year's story around our budget isn't just about those certified positions, but it's about the non-certified positions as well. We have talked about the teacher shortage. We have talked about increasing pressures on teachers. We have talked about the difficulty covering classes when teachers are out. And with the substitute shortage, when teachers are in school, it won't be unusual for them to need to cover a colleague's class or to step up. We've got principals who are covering classes on a regular basis. As we have talked with the board, our principals have shared over the last 2, if not 3 budget cycles, that those non-certified positions become essential because they insulate the certified positions, the teachers and the administrators, to do their essential job functions and not to be pulled away for recess duty, for lunch duty, for bus duty, or to cover a colleague's class. So when we want to continue to grow the program, deepen the program, sharpen our practice, we need to insulate those certified positions, and we do that with non-certified positions. And so this budget additionally includes 5 additional paraprofessional positions. Those will work primarily in the special education programmed areas. This district includes 2 what we are calling safety monitor positions. Just a few years ago, we referred to these as hall monitors, but additional bodies in the building who can be aware of student movement, student activity, as well as the perimeter of the school. These are not security positions. They do not replace SROs. They are not badged uniformed police officers. They're just an extra pair of eyes and ears to be moving through the halls to help be proactive in keeping students moving at a reasonable pace, checking with visitors who come into the building, and being an additional presence at lunch or at recess. There is an HVAC maintainer in this budget. I do want to note that this is in direct relationship to a reduction in a related contract line. So we expect by hiring this position full-time, we will reduce the dollars that we spend on contracted calls for air conditioners or for heating units that go down. We expect to do more of our own repair and more of our own preventative maintenance with an in-house position, but this is essentially going to be cost neutral once it is offset by that reduction. We are adding an additional part-time custodial position in part because of those special education programs that we're building out, including the off-site location now here with the Guilford Transition Academy. We pick up more square footage. And then there's a health aid, and I mentioned this at each meeting, and I failed to go back and correct the slide. This should be labeled as existing as well. This is a health aid that had previously been paid for with ARPA funds. This health aid rotates around the elementary schools, conducting vision screenings, hearing screenings, and scoliosis screenings so that the actual school nurse can stay free to work with students who have medical needs, parents who have concerns, medications that need to be distributed. It was enormously helpful when we brought it on with the beginning of the pandemic, and again, it's a position that we don't feel ready to release just because the grant funding has expired. And additionally, Dr. Balistraci mentioned the public hearings that we have held. In all of the public hearings that we've held, people have come and shared really thoughtful comments, and most of those comments have tended to be around our athletic programs. And so while these are relatively small dollar amounts compared to the other items that you see on this list, they're important to our community, and they're important opportunities for our students. So you do see an increase in rental fees for both ice time and pool time. While we have both hockey and swim teams in Guilford, we have neither an ice rink nor a pool in Guilford. We need to rent those facilities for years. And in the case of hockey, for decades, parents have been paying for those rental fees almost completely. So over the last 3 budgets, we've been building up the operational budget to offset those expenses so that we can say we provide facilities for all of our varsity athletic opportunities, even the ones where we don't own one of those facilities locally. And additionally, there are some expanded coaching positions here with additional assistant coaching positions dedicated to the tennis team, the football program, the crew program, and in fact, a head cheerleading position for 2 seasons, as this budget will recognize the return of cheer, an offering that we have not had in our program for the last several years. To take a look at what that means for staffing, it means that we're asking for a net increase of 4.7 teacher positions. We're asking for an increase of 5 para positions, 1.5 custodial maintenance positions, and 2 of those monitor positions that I mentioned. So we're talking about 4.7 certified positions and 8.5 of the non-certified positions that I discussed because of the important role that they play. I will again note here, while instructional coaches, our teachers, fall within the teacher contract and our certified master teachers, we're not asking for an increase in instructional coaching this year, although we're expanding the supports, and there is no increase in the administrative side of the program here this year either. The focus is on classrooms, certified teachers, and non-certified supports. While this year's enrollment reduction is minimal, and in fact, I'd actually describe enrollment as flat this year. I expect by the time we actually enroll and get to the October 1 number, it will be flat. You won't see any reduction. We do know that we are at the tail end of some declining enrollment for a number of years. In those budget assumptions, we noted that we don't ask for new resources before we look at existing resources and repurpose existing resources. This year, again, the coach restructuring is an example of that. But over the last decade or more, we have been responding to the declining classroom size by reducing teaching positions in areas like a reduced number of elementary classroom positions, world language positions, PE, music, math, and English language arts at the middle level. But those reductions did not result in a flat reduction to our bottom line because those FTE positions have been reallocated, repurposed into areas where we've seen increasing need, even though we've seen decreased enrollment. We expanded to full-day kindergarten a number of years ago. We increased offerings in elementary art. We have seen increases in the need for both school social workers and psychologists. I've mentioned several times just tonight the increased number of special education teaching positions that we have seen, and we have grown the ranks of those instructional coaches. So while we're not asking for new positions this year, we have built that cohort over the last decade or more from 3 to approximately 13 in-district, full-time, embedded teacher supports. This is professional development and professional learning that is delivered to our teachers every day in their classrooms with their own students. It's simply the best way to learn and to grow our practice. To put a little more specifics to that, to look specifically at the area of special education or special needs, from school year 17-18 to this projected budget next year, we've seen the number of school psychologists increase from 5 to 8. We've seen the number of school social workers increase from 8 to 10. And again, remember, that's 2 this year that will be shifting from grant funding to budget funding. And we've seen the number of special education teachers increase from 39 to 47. Remember, that parallels the growth of in-district programming. We would not have been able to open an elementary program that focuses on behavior without hiring staff to do that. A therapeutic support program at both middle schools and at the high school, an alternative high school that runs on an alternate day. Our alternative high schools classes don't begin until 11 and they run until 4 in the afternoon, as well as the Guilford Transition Academy across the street that now provides services to our students through, again, the end of the school year in which they turn 22. So by growing out those in-district programs, we keep more of our students at home, we reduce transportation costs, reduce tuition costs, but more importantly, support those students and their families better by keeping the students at home. These have been important reallocations of resources as we have focused in those areas. And then again, I'll just close by noting we recognize that this is a significant ask. We recognize that this is one of the bigger increases that we have asked for, at least in my time here in the Guilford Public Schools. But it comes at the end of 6 years of really low increases, below or well below 2%. It comes in an era of teacher shortages that are impacting the way that we do business. This budget may be the first budget that we've brought forward to you that includes no projected retirement savings, because in many cases we are now finding that it costs more to replace a teacher who lives Guilford rather than less. In the current really competitive hiring environment that we find ourselves in, that is going to continue to drive decisions that we make. And this budget is built on, we feel, really thoughtful and important investments in the program. This is not a status quo budget. We believe that this budget makes us better moving forward. And with that, should I mention?
Bonding, yes.
There's also a bonding request. So that concludes the presentation on the operational budget, but this budget from the Board of Ed this year does include a bonding request that has 4 significant items on it. At Melissa Jones Elementary School, there is a project that will replace piping, ventilation, and significantly the oil tank at Melissa Jones. Many of the pipes are still original and we're beginning to experience corrosion, and we've had a number of floods because of the pipes. We need to get ahead of that, and this is preventative maintenance as well as expanding and improving in areas like the oil tank. District-wide, we are looking to do a fiber project and an internet infrastructure project. Much of our work now runs through the internet. We need to make sure that we have a system that is robust enough to manage the classroom demands that the teachers place on that, all of our copy machines, all of our communications, and a significant number of our safety and security programs that run through the internet and the Wi-Fi system. And so we want to proactively make sure that we're always growing out that system and that infrastructure is robust enough to meet our needs. There is a project at Guilford High School, Adams Middle School, and Baldwin Middle School to install cell repeaters. We need to have reliable cell service in our buildings. It is a safety concern as much as anything else. While students are not encouraged or allowed to use their cell phones for social activities in classrooms, students will use cell phones periodically for lessons. I have been in classes where students are scanning QR codes, looking up information, conducting research, taking pictures for a project. There are appropriate uses for cell phones in the classrooms. We do not allow students to use their cell phones for social purposes in the classrooms, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to have a reliable cell signal across all of our buildings. And finally, the tennis court located at Lakes Elementary School is cracking, it's heaving, and that court needs to be refinished and replaced. This would be the last tennis court replacement. This is the last one to be replaced. We've upgraded and replaced the courts at Adams. This past summer, we completely redid all the courts at the high school. The courts at Baldwin were removed a number of years ago. This would be the last court sitting on school property that needs to be upgraded and replaced. And I will note, while during the school day, that's an investment in the school programs, after hours on weekends and across the summer, that becomes an investment into the community as that space becomes a community space off hours. And then every year, you know that we add a line for architectural and engineering fees so that we can bring you good and reliable and relatively specific numbers when we bring proposals before you. So with that, I will again say that I will turn it back to Dr. Balistraci to close.
Yes, so thank you. Again, as Dr. Freeman detailed, this budget really presents and reflects our commitment to academic excellence in Guilford Public Schools and to our students meeting their potential. It reflects our commitment to the social and emotional wellness of students. We had a presentation at a Board of Ed meeting in the last couple of weeks in which our Community Day program presented asset survey, and the numbers of students reporting mental health concerns is higher than a quarter of the student body that takes that survey. We have needs that need to be met, and they're not just academic. Guilford is, according to the School and State Finance Project, these are numbers I look at every year, and the latest are the 2021-22 net current expenditures per pupil. Guilford is 77th out of 166 in per pupil spending. So we have one of the top school systems in the state, and our spending per pupil puts us in the middle and in fact slightly lower than the middle. So we ask again for your consideration of this budget. As we've noted, it is currently representing a 5.8% increase. I will tell you that...
5.08.
Sorry, what did I say?
5.8.
Oh, that's not right at all. Thank you for that correction. That's important. 5.08% increase. I will note that our area districts are coming in ranging from mid-4s to as high as Groton, 13.5% increase. Some examples: Clinton, Board of Ed is coming in at 5.24%, Fairfield 5.39%, Simsbury 4.97%, Darien 6.48%, New Canaan 6.59%, and as I mentioned, Groton at 13.5%. This is a trend. It is becoming more expensive to deliver the services that we have always wanted to deliver, and so again, this budget, we believe as a Board of Ed, is very carefully and efficiently crafted, but does reflect the current economic environment. We thank you for your time.
Thank you, Drs. Freeman and Balistraci. Yes, we've seen this presentation. I know,
Sorry.
Paul, you said, how much do you want me to go over? And I was like, well, there are people that haven't seen it before.
Yeah.
So thank you for being as detailed as you have been over all the presentations you've given. Before I open it up to Q&A for the public while you're here, I do want to make sure I address the fact that there were numerous questions from the Board of Education that were asked and of members of the Board of Finance as recently as a couple of nights ago. I haven't had a chance to look at all the responses, but this is the printout of all of the questions that over the last, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks, the
Yes.
Board of Ed
Correct.
and the Board of Finance have asked. I want to thank those that asked these questions. I also want to thank Linda and the staff for the amount of work that goes into this. I know it's a lot, and I'm going to be doing the same thing on the other side when the town presents, that there have been numerous questions that have been answered. So it would be remiss not to address the fact that there are numerous questions. I haven't counted them up. I don't need to, but between the Board of Education and the Board of Finance questions, this is incredibly helpful, especially as we go into Thursday. So thank you for all of that work. I know it is. I know it is a team, but I know you facilitate it and you pull them all together. So thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the public. At this point, we'll stop the screen sharing of the presentation. There our numerous members that are on Zoom virtually and here in the audience. So I would ask that if there are any questions, and I'd like to just indicate questions, not necessarily comments. There will be public forum to do that, but any questions of the Board of Education while they are in front of us right now. Yes. If I could ask you to come up, name and address, largely because the microphones are a little bit sensitive, so if you want to sit next to Dr. Balistraci, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
My name is Christopher Breton. I live at 20 Trailwood Drive here in Guilford. I have several questions,
Okay.
but I give it to you. You came here, and I've seen your presentation. You've had to beg the town for money, and I'm just glad I never had to. I just had to beg my boss when I made my budgets. What is the total number of special ed students that are enrolled right now?
It is about 14% of our total population. I know the percentage off the top of my head. I don't have the number off the top of my head.
So that's 14% of 3,000 some odd.
Correct. Important to note that special education students fall across a real broad spectrum of needs. So some special education students may require physical support, may require a lot of academic and even functional support. Other students may be identified as special education and might attend a fully regular schedule and have the support of a special education teacher for a structured study hall or even as needed. So while that number sits at 14%, the needs of those students is going to be enormously variable and individualized.
And if I may, as of October 1st of this year, the enrollment was approximately 3,100. I'm sorry?
Quick math, thank you.
Yes.
It's a little over 425-ish.
Yep,
You-
that's exactly right.
So has that number increased or decreased over the last, say, since 2016?
Increased.
It's increased.
It's increasing across all schools across the nation.
And over the next 10 years, do you expect it to double or go,
I couldn't say.
couldn't say? All right. I did notice in your presentation, and I heard it when you gave it to the Board of Selectmen, yes, or no, to the Board of Finance. You talked about a decline in student enrollment. So since 2016, about how many students have we gone down?
Probably 300 to 400. There is a demographic study on our website, and at this point, we are probably at the low point of that decline. We project to be leveling out over the next 5 years and then increasing out 5 to 10 years.
313.
Thank you.
So, do you know why we've had a decline?
Yes. Student enrollments across Connecticut have been declining in suburban communities. The decline really began precipitously around 2008 or 9 with the fiscal crash. Families started having fewer children. You saw it in communities like Guilford, like the shoreline in general, happening across the state. In fact, in previous budget presentations, I would show an illustration. We had a previous demographic study that predated the one I've mentioned a couple times tonight that projected our decline. While we declined like other districts, we didn't decline as precipitously as was projected, and we didn't decline as precipitously as other communities like Madison and other shoreline communities that ended up, in fact, closing elementary schools because of the drastic decline that they saw in their enrollment. We went down, we didn't go down as much as we thought, and we're now beginning to level out, and according to the current projections, we'll again begin growing 4 or 5 years from here.
Okay, you said over the next 10 years, you expect it to increase?
Yes.
But that's not a guarantee though, right?
It's based
No.
on birth rate and in and out migration.
It's not a guarantee, but,
Right.
but
It's a
our
hope.
it's not a hope. It's based on demographic predictions. And while, as Dr. Freeman just mentioned in our last demographic study, we did not decline to the extent that the demographic study predicted. It was still on trend very closely, so that when we're told that we should expect to see an increase, evidence suggests that that will in fact happen.
Okay. Since 2016 to the 24-25 proposed budget, what is the total percentage of increase on the budgets?
So we have,
Because you kept talking about those 6 years at 2% or less,
25%.
25%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the Board of Education?
I can't help myself.
Anyone on Zoom? Who knows how to use the raise hand function? A couple years ago, no one knew. Now everyone knows how to use it. Anybody else in person? While we're waiting for someone who might be a little shy and may then raise their hand, Board of Finance. We have a bit of an opportunity here. I want to try to keep to a certain schedule, but we'll have plenty of opportunity on Thursday night. But are there any questions you want to ask now regarding?
Mine's not so
budget?
much of a question, but
Sure.
just to follow up on the point that you were making in response to the question of the increased number of students receiving special education services. I just wanted to highlight two things that you touched on in your presentation, but I think they bear repeating. The first is that there's been an active mission of the district to keep more students in district. So it's not necessarily a surprise that there's been an increase in the number of students within the district receiving special education services, because that's been the goal. The other aspect of it is you're paying less in tuition to outsource those students. And the other thing that's, I think, very important to keep in mind is that how volatile the diagnosis can be. You could have a student at the beginning of the school year who's already in district and has been for their entire academic career, who is not identified as having special needs. And then throughout the course of that school year, they could become a special educator or fall within what we now would classify as a special education student for purposes of our discussion. And so I think it's important to note that the volatility of that number from year to year, and that's why keeping it on target is a challenge, and that's why the effort has been made to try and keep the budgeted number in line with what's actually being spent.
That's exactly right. And the trend to see increasing numbers of students with identified special educational needs is not unique to Guilford. So I mentioned that our identification rate is around 14%. It is not unusual to find Connecticut school districts that are north of 20% of their student population identified as having special needs.
And just to follow up on something, sorry to monopolize this, but as I've said to the members of the Board of Education and to Dr. Freeman multiple times, the non-certified positions, from my perspective, the most valuable resource in the district is teacher time. And so if you have support systems in place like paraprofessionals, like school psychologists, who are able to address the needs of our students, that takes the burden off of the quote-unquote regular education teacher so that he or she can then devote more time in the classroom to the regular education students instead of devoting more time to the special education students who may need more assistance, but that's not, from my perspective, and I'm not on the Board of Education, not the role of the regular education teacher with regard to special education students.
I would not disagree with that. I'd only add that those school psychologists and school social workers, while a significant portion of their time is committed to students with identified special needs, there's also students who have intermittent needs, right? And so students who may not be identified as special education will go through periods of anxiety or stress or depression or experience a loss in their lives that will also interrupt their learning, could possibly be disruptive to the class, and those school social workers, those school psychologists, school counselors, those are there for those students as well, not strictly and not only for students with identified special needs.
We talked talked about an increase in transportation. What year are we in on the transportation contract?
We are, this year is the first year of a renewal. So the 24-25 is the second year of a 3-year contract.
So 3 years, so we're in the first year of a 3-year?
Yes.
And then you also indicated the shortage of teachers everywhere, and that we address the salary deficiencies in being able to keep our teachers. Philosophically, I'm wondering if you had an opinion on what else we can do to keep our teachers or attract more teachers. What else in the tool chest can we do, if you will? I mean, beside, medical benefits, I don't know. It's just
It's a really good question. It's one that we've been wrestling with. We've been asking ourselves a lot. We have, in fact, worked, this was grant funded, but we worked with a marketing firm to put materials on our website to more proactively attract young teachers to working in our schools, and recognized that if you're a young person and you're looking for a place to start a career, Guilford is a great place to work, but you might want to live in New Haven because there's more nightlife, because there's other opportunities there. And so we've thought really sort of thoughtfully about how to market all of Guilford, right? We're equidistant between Boston and New York. We're equidistant between New London and New Haven. It is a really good place to be for lots of reasons. The school district itself is a really good place to work. We've got principals who are instructional leaders, those instructional coaches I meant. You come to Guilford as a young teacher and spend 5 or 10 years here, you leave better than when you came. You really hone your craft and your skills by working in Guilford Public Schools. We've got small class sizes. And I know that was a real topic of conversation as the board finalized their budget. But our average class size, K through 4 in Guilford, is between 17 and 18 every year. It is a place where you can get to know your children. You've got supportive parents. So part of it is we want people to know that this is a good place to practice the craft of teaching. Even all of that being said, we're seeing more mid-career movement among teachers than we have. It might be great to work in Guilford, but then you buy a house somewhere else and now there's an opening and it's half the drive to your home. And so people are moving, and I think it's not unique to teaching. The job, my father worked for United Illuminating for 41 years. No one's doing that anymore, right? And so we're beginning to experience that, and other districts are now willing to hire at step or offer signing bonuses or add years of experience. And so districts are competing with each other much more aggressively than we competed before. And so all of that goes into the mix. We go to local hiring fairs at all of the local Connecticut universities. We try to be more aggressive in our advertising, but really we market ourselves. It is a good place to be a teacher. It continues to be a good place to be a teacher. I think we need to think more about how to foreground that even more, how to leverage that more aggressively. But I think our greatest strength is going to continue to be our greatest strength. And this is a little off topic, but we just closed a posting for a principal position at Melissa Jones Elementary School, and we have over 50 applicants for that position, an incredibly good response. And I was a little nervous because of all the pressures, but an incredibly good response. And as we're meeting those candidates, they're saying that they applied because they want to be in Guilford. It's not unusual for them to really experienced educators to say, I'm not looking to move. This is the only application I have out. I don't want to leave where I am, but if this is an opportunity, I want to come here. We need to keep working on that and leverage that, I think, better.
Thank you.
I got a few questions for clarification on some of the new hiring.
Sure.
So I was just kind of curious, you mentioned these 4 positions that are existing. Were those new hires in 23, 24?
The 4 are different. They fall into 2 different categories. The school social worker and the school psychologist were hired when the ESSER dollars became available to us. So we hired them as soon as we received the dollars out of the ESSER grant. The other two positions, the kindergarten classroom position and the special educational position, those were both hired at the beginning of this school year in response to unanticipated enrollment.
Did the ESSER grants run out last year? Is that when they came onto the budget?
No, we've been able to drag our ESSER dollars into this school year a little bit. They expire right about now. We're running out of those dollars now.
So those existing teachers will come on the budget this year?
Yes, that's why they're in this budget proposal, because they're no longer grant funded.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask about the safety monitors. Were there 2 safety monitors hired last year or during the 23?
No, we've had, they weren't called safety monitors. We've had hall monitors at the high school for as long as I can remember. One was essentially an indoor hall monitor position. One was more of a parking lot monitor position. Those have been at the high school, again, for as long as I can remember. At the beginning of this school year, because of the town's generous offer of ARPA dollars, we brought on 6 safety monitors. Those positions were placed at the 4 elementary schools, Baldwin and Adams. They are in the schools today, and they are paid for with ARPA dollars that expired this year. The original proposal that the administration brought to the Board of Ed continued all 6 of those positions. That was one of the reductions that the Board of Education made that Dr. Balistraci noted in the opening of our presentation. There's currently enough funding left for 2 of those 6 positions, although we may try to use those dollars differently and more creatively to try to find a benefit for all of the remaining schools and not just 2 of the others.
Okay, so originally it was asked for 6, but it's going to be an ask for 2.
Correct.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask about the custodian, the part-time custodian. I see him listed in the new presentation as 0.5 FTE. Looking through some of the other exhibits, I came up with a note that there was actually 1.5 FTE of new custodian.
So one would be the
staffing.
HVAC maintainer I mentioned, and one would be the custodian. So they both fall under the same custodial contract. I have referred to one as, I've probably referred to one as a maintainer or custodian alternatingly, and one as a 0.5 custodian.
That balances. I
Yes.
had them in a different note.
Yep.
Okay.
If I may take a moment too, just because it's been a topic, I do want to share a comment made by one of my colleagues, Mrs. Baldwin, at our recent Board of Ed meeting to Dr. Freeman and the administration, which I think is really important. One of the things we're seeing, particularly for districts across the state who have are coming in at really high percentages, part of what they're experiencing is the end of ESSER dollars and the need to now fund an enormous number of staff that were supported by those ESSER dollars in their districts. Now, for some districts, they were really necessary at the time, right? I mean, particularly some of our inner city districts really, during the pandemic, needed to consider staff to support student learning in a variety of remote and hybrid situations. But my colleague noted aloud, and I just wanted to repeat because I agree wholeheartedly, at how very carefully Dr. Freeman and his administration, when the ESSER dollars were first received, thought through what they would be spent on well in advance of the time that we would end the use of those dollars and what that would mean for our budget. So that while there are some staff that are now coming off those ESSER grant, and over the last year or two, we've had a couple of staff come over those ESSER grants. The initial use of those funds was carefully considered so that would not create for us or for our town a huge increase. But also, each year over the last year, couple of years, a couple of those positions have been brought forth to the board to come into the budget. So I want to repeat her great appreciation to our administration for both thinking very thoughtfully and carefully about how to use those ESSER funds to support our students and our school, but to do it in a very careful manner so that at no point were we experiencing what some of our fellow districts are across the state.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I look back now going back 4 years, where we were, I guess I could say 3 years, but 4 years was when we, all went virtual. We had, but by the way, we had everything ready to go as a Board of Finance. We had approved budgets. And everything stopped, as we all know, and we went back and started the whole process of looking at budgets again. In the year of 2020, when there was only 7 people who voted for the budget, there was some real, on the town side and the Board of Ed side, there was some incredible, restraint. But I do recall the next year, the same thing you mentioned is now the ESSER dollars started flowing in. ARPA funds started flowing in. And one of the questions that kept on coming up from this board is, how are we using them, and what's going to happen when it runs out? And I can tell you that all you got to do is read the papers and read about other communities in Connecticut, and I'm not going to name them, but I know one in particular, and I will never name it, but if you look it up, you'll probably find it, that they use the ESSER funds to lower class sizes. They used it for, they used it for things that they knew at some point it's going to run out. And they made, whether it's an excuse or however they used those funds, it was used in a way that they knew that there was going to be, they knew there was going to be problems. And I don't ever remember any of those positions being, oh, well, we're just trying to do some things that are nice to do's. They were absolutely essential. And the question then kept on coming up the next year and the year after that. Well, what about now? Do we still need them? Do we still need them? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes. We still need them, but every single year it's been the same question and the same response. And I think there's really a hopeful, all right, we're good, we can eliminate them. And no school district in Connecticut, across the country, really has that opportunity to do it. And if they didn't use those funds right, or in a way that wasn't, was not sustainable, they're looking at increases. And I don't know if that's the 13% example you gave. I have no idea, because that's not who I'm talking about.
But it's a problem for some.
But there's a lot of communities that are really struggling now, because they're like, well, it ran out and we need them, but we also used them for other things that now we're popping class sizes, and we're doing other things that weren't really what those funds were intended for. So I do commend the administration, as you said. I'm glad you brought that up, because this is not a secret that these ESSER funds are running out. There's no secret the ARPA funds are running out. We all knew they were running out. How are they used, and do we really need to incorporate them? And that's what you're doing. That's what you're looking at. So.
I have another question too, a couple more clarifications.
Sure, yeah, and then I had one more. It ended up being a comment because I thought it was a question and I found it, but I feel it's important. Go ahead.
I think you're doing a reallocation of math coaches, so that's not any new hiring, is that correct?
No new hiring.
Okay, there's one other. Oh, yeah, the SRO officers, are they listed on here, or is this because of the way you're splitting it with the police department that they're actually listed on the police department's budget?
They're
we don't-
shared expense, sorry.
Yeah, we don't list them as FTEs. They are employed by the police department. They are assigned to our schools. We do split some of the cost, so it is carried under a different line. We don't show them anywhere as FTEs.
Okay, but there's 2 additional there, and you'll take half the cost then, if I...
This budget includes an increase of 1 from where we are currently
One increase of
today.
1.
Yes.
Okay, and there's 1 currently.
There's 1 filled in our district currently. There are 2 budgeted for in our district, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to fill a second one. And then next year there will be 3 budgeted, and I don't anticipate, I'd be pleased and surprised if we could fill it in the beginning of the school year. I don't anticipate that, but we will fill it as quickly as possible.
Okay, I got lost in your comment a little. There's 1 now and 1 more for this budget
So
cycle.
there's 1 now.
Yeah.
There's 1 budgeted currently that we are unable to fill. So there are 2 positions. 1 of them is filled currently, and a 3rd is being added next year.
Okay, so 3 total.
And if we had all 3 filled by the end of next school year, we would all be really happy with that progress.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that, these positions are expiring when they can, because the grant money was supposed to be temporary anyway, so.
You know, I'll say what I've said over and over again. We were all excited when the pandemic was declared over and we all took our masks off, but the impact on the students did not end the day we took our masks off. They still have needs. They had lost social time. They had impacted instructional time. We're still dealing with the instructional and social and emotional impacts, even though the students may not be home under quarantine and we're not teaching remotely the way we did. We didn't see the needs end when we took our masks off or when the grants expired, and we're still dealing with meeting our students' needs.
The question I was going to have that I found the answer for, but I think it's important, is going back to the medical. I thought it was a bit coincidental, and maybe not, that the investment number was $883,000 of investment that's in this budget. The medical insurance went down 802. So
Completely coincidental.
completely. So when I look at that, reinvesting, as you stated, with the investments, I then wanted to know, I was going to ask Linda, what was the percentage or the amount increase from year to year, which then I really just had to go back to the slide and do the simple math. But from this fiscal year we're in now to the one before, the medical was up 1.4 million. And the year before that was $830,000 that went up. I'm saying that more of a comment than a question, because this is going to the point of the opportunity to invest, taking medical out of the equation, whereas the last 2 years we've seen increases of about $2.2 to $2.3 million of medical, which is not in our control at all, although we do try to control it by going up to bid and doing all the things that Mary Jane and Linda do to try to bring those numbers in line and be aggressive and being competitive. Those numbers are huge numbers that have had to have been addressed the last 2 years.
Well, yes, and the only thing I would share about this year, and it's a caution that was shared with me, is that medical is about as volatile as special education. And so while we can recognize, and I tried to change my language to say it offered some relief this year, but the investments that we noted will be continuing costs, and that relief from medical might very well be a one-year thing because we did go out to bid, and so we got a little bit of room this year, but that doesn't mean that the accountants and the insurance companies won't come back next year with it. So we do recognize that it provided some relief, but I don't want to mislead this board or anybody in the community to suggest that all of those investments are paid for. They're not. That's still an investment that this town is being asked to make, and we think for really good reason. But I just want to share that caution that was shared with me when I talked about medical a couple of meetings ago.
Is that, and again, benefits are important.
Yes.
For recruitment.
And retention.
For retention. They're just important. We all have benefits, hopefully, most of us in our jobs, right? But these investments are going directly to the student. You've got teachers.
Yes.
There are a couple of their facility needs, but that's still for the students. You've got ice time. You've got things that are directly related to the students
right.
as opposed to benefits. It's a nice shift to be able to see that. So
That's exactly right.
I wanted to make
hate
that
when the budget includes a big investment into electricity or heating oil or those employee costs or roofing. It's just not what I got into this to do. So I can't get excited about a new roof, but boy, I can get excited about math coaches at every elementary school. We have very different jobs, you and I.
But even tuition, I mean, you could even say that that's directly student related and it's understandable and it fluctuates. But those other line items can be difficult to swallow at times, so, thank you. Other questions? Or should we wrap it up for Board of Education? Anyone on Zoom? This will be the last call. And I'm not gonna start singing that song either, closing time. Okay.
Thank you again
Thank
for
you.
your time and your
Dr.
questions.
Freeman, Dr. Rouse, Tracy, very much appreciate the presentation. And we will now move on to the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget and revenue projections by First Selectman Matthew Hogue. Good evening.
Good evening.
I should also mention that all of the Board of Selectmen are in attendance in either Zoom or in person. So
Absolutely.
got a lot of support here.
Thank you for bringing that up. And, I was going to do that myself. Good evening. This should be familiar to you folks. It's relatively the same presentation minus one slide. So please bear with me for the redundancy. We've traditionally talked about what the mission of the town government, of a town government is. Public protection and safety is usually, if you go back to some of your early philosophers, that's the reason societies were built. Maintain infrastructure and sustainability, provide robust town services, support the Board of Education in whatever way we can, and then also enhance the quality of life. Before we move to the next slide, I just want to mention that I'm pleased to present this budget from the Board of Selectmen, which was approved unanimously by the board. And I want to thank my fellow board members, my colleagues, for the work they had done, for the insight that they shared, and for the concerns they shared, not only for the departments and the expenses, but the residents of this community in terms of the impacts on taxes. So thank you very much to the board. Also, I was pleased during the budget hearings that and so many of you were able to attend and hear firsthand where the pressures were from our departments. And then lastly, I want to thank the staff, particularly the department heads, and most of whom are either in the room or on Zoom. So be prepared for a question or two to get deflected to you if need be, because I know you'll have the answers. One thing that I think we've always talked about, not always talked about, but we've talked about of late, that a budget really is a reflection of our values as a community. What do we think is important for us to spend our money on, and for whom? So one of the things I took out of this presentation that was in the previous year was a list of all the accomplishments in each department, the number of permits issued, the number of calls fire made, the number of calls that the police department made. So we spared you that in this presentation, but we will have that data to support it. That depicts where the services where the services are and what you're getting for your tax dollars. Next slide, please. Key budget objectives and key factors. The first and foremost is to maintain the high level of services that this community has come to expect, and in some cases, demand of their municipality. In order to do that, we need to assure that the appropriate staffing levels are there to meet the community expectation, while also optimizing employee performance. We do not add employees willy-nilly. It needs to be fully justified and related to some form of service delivery or support for service delivery. This budget includes 2 new full-time equivalents. We've already talked about at least one of them, the school resource officer, which Dr. Freeman indicated is embedded. It's a police department resource, but is assigned to the schools. And again, you heard this is the 3rd resource officer, which I think is about as far as we're going to go for the time being. And that would allow for a dedicated resource officer at the high school, one to split the 2 middle schools and one to cover the 4 elementary schools. So we are protecting the entire universe. The second is what's called a SWAP, SWAPP, Social Worker and Police Partnership. This was an idea that was brought to us by Lynn Landry of Youth and Family Services and Chief Massey from the PD. This is a relatively new phenomenon in police departments. I believe there are 6 in the state of Connecticut that have an embedded social worker in the police department because the significant number of opportunities and need for those kind of services when the police department is out in the field. And it also will go to alleviating some of the work that the police department, that the officers have to do, because this can now be turfed to the social worker. And again, that is going to be in Lynn's budget, the Youth and Family Services, but it's going to be assigned full-time to the police department. Some of the other things that we are committed to doing is to fund the pensions and our OPEB liabilities at actuarially recommended levels. unlike some political bodies, if you know, we've stood fast on that over time, because if you don't, you wind up with situations like state governments have around the country where they're woefully underfunded, and larger percentages of their budgets are going to make up the deficit that they didn't fund. We also are protecting with this budget tax relief programs for veterans, elderly, and the disabled. We also addressed the Guilford Employees Association salary deficiencies. I think you've heard this. We did an out-of-contract adjustment to the salaries at our Guilford Employees Association because it became evident that these were barely above working, living wage salaries. So this is year 2 of a 2-year agreement to raise those salaries, to make them more competitive with the private sector as well as our other municipalities. We have a continued investment in information technology. This year, you're going to see it's a 61% increase in our technology line item. Dr. Freeman mentioned the cost of software is gone through the roof. We are also absorbing the cost for our online permitting system. Heretofore, we've been spending capital dollars to build it. Now will be paying for the operating cost of software, et cetera, for that system. Next slide, please. So what we have here is a 2.99% budget increase, total operating increase, and it's broken up as follows. I know you can read, most of you can read this or see it. The town operating budget is a 3.96% increase. The operating capital budget at 0.28%, and then debt service basically is flat. I want to point out that the town operating budget, the increase attributed to salaries is 75% of that change year over year. Then if you take if you add in this, if you take the salaries and the increases in our information services, you're looking at 82% of the increase, that $1.37 million. 82% of that is in those two buckets. So that leaves a little over $200,000 for increases throughout the balance of the budget. I'm going to anticipate a couple of questions that Jonathan had already raised and we'll come back with. There were some other additions to employees, time on the job. There were extra hours committed to Park and Rec's. Their 2 cooks are going from 35 to 40 hours. The bus drivers that transport our seniors and our and those with disabilities throughout town, the number of hours per week is going from 96 to 106 for those drivers. And then in the Selectman's office, our communications specialist, AKA Tracy Brinkman, is going from her previously allotted 30 hours a week to 35 hours, but it also includes the elimination of a part-time employee in the Selectman's office, a 24-hour part-time employee, which has already been done in this budget cycle because we moved the purchasing function fully into the finance office. Next slide, please. This is when we took the axe to some of the budgets, which we have to do every year. The budgets are not always obtainable, but they do always list out what the department heads think they need. So we made some significant cuts out of the operating budgets from the departments. We took out over $500,000. On the capital budget, we took out $960,000. So the total that we took out of the request from our department heads was about $1.5 million. Next slide, please. Increases in employee benefits. This is a slide that has not always looked like this over the past few years. We've traditionally seen some significant increases in our employee benefits. Healthcare costs were rising, and we have started to introduce OPEB payments now into the mix, which we never had before. The town pension contribution now includes the cost of living adjustment that was granted to all retirees by the Board of Selectmen, so that is in here. So The medical line item, medical benefits. We are benefiting here dramatically because of the fact that we went out to bid for stop loss. That's largely what it is. The stop loss on our insurance stop loss came down dramatically. We get almost a double whammy, if you would. We see here a budgetary decrease, but in the current fiscal year, we're going to see an actual decrease in the spending, which means that it will fall to fund balance as surplus, a pretty significant piece. So, okay. Next slide, please. We do have a capital budget that is relatively consistent with where we've been over the last several years. And in that, there are vehicles which traditionally would include police vehicles. But this year, we just issued a purchase order for 6 new vehicles, which will cover the needs for the current fiscal year and some of the subsequent fiscal year, and also to replace a couple of vehicles that are no longer in service because a tree fell on one of them and something else. So, and the reason we moved aggressively on this, and we utilized ARPA funds on this, so the police vehicles aren't in here, we used ARPA funds on it, was because we've been having a devil of a time acquiring the vehicles, particularly the hybrid vehicles. We have one hybrid vehicle in the police department. This is now going to move our fleet, significantly towards going to all hybrid. At this point, the fully electric are still challenging for many organizations, particularly ours. How would we charge the 6 of them every night or in between shifts? So there are going to be some challenges long-term on full electrification, but we're making some strides with the hybrids. The equipment is largely in fire, golf, park and rec, police and public works. The infrastructure is sidewalks and enhanced, improved drainage in various areas around town. Building maintenance includes HVAC here at Park and Rec, and also flooring and ceiling tiles in this building. This building is 25 or 26 years old and starting to show signs of wear. Technology, as I mentioned, is largely most of the big increase on the operating side, but there's also some items in there. There's some funds for the library, some cameras, some security cameras, and a Public Works mobile system will allow them to be fully access systems while they're out in the field and update their databases and their work assignments. Lastly, Fields and Lake, that's Parks and Recreation. There are lighting, irrigation projects to be undertaken, as well as Lake Quantipoc weed control, which is in Park and Rec. That's Kevin McGee. Next up. All right, as I mentioned, we are trying to be consistent with how much we fund out of the capital we fund out of the operating budget and do not go out to bond. But one thing that is pretty obvious to me here, yeah, this is nice, but this suggests that we haven't kept up with cost of living increases. We have inflation. So we're going to need to start to look at moving this up a little bit, and because there's always ways that we can do that. Next, please. Debt service is always an interesting thing to talk about, particularly the last couple of years with debt service having leveled off. So what you see here may not match up with what you see in here, because in here we'll see the premium credits that have been applied, which are not applied here. This is the actual spend that is required, but the premium credits will go to offset that. All right. Next slide, please. Mary Jane's favorite slide. And Mary Jane, anything you want to say about it? I didn't think so. One of the things I think we need to note here is the drop or the decline would have been a little more dramatic had we not made the decision last year to bond, in our latest issue, to bond over 15 years as opposed to over our traditional 20 years. And what that did was it saved us, in the aggregate, over the long term, several $1 million as a result of decreasing the length of time that we bonded. I've mentioned this, I think, the last time. I think this is really a good reflection, this is a reflection of good management, and Mary Jane has done a terrific job of managing our debt and keeping debt reasonable in terms of dramatic changes, either up or down. And I just want to mention that between debt service and employee benefits, which both of them are either flat or up only slightly, they account for 42% of our operating budget, all right? So when you have that portion of that big a portion of your budget flat, basically flat, that allows you to allocate dollars to the balance of the budget that have traditionally not been addressed because we've been experiencing those increases on those other line items. Okay, next up, please. ARPA funding, everybody gets to talk about ARPA, and in this budget, you'll see the line items that are currently being supported through ARPA funding for salaries. In the capital line item, there's a couple $100,000 that we're utilizing there. Office 365 migration. I know Jonathan and I will have a conversation about this at some point. Going to the Office 365 and eliminating the need to manage your servers and maintenance and all kinds of the software costs associated with it. Next, please. The specific components of the operating budget, as you can see, operating revenue, I'm sorry, not interest income is up $250,000. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There is some, I think there's room for movement in that line item. This is a conservative estimate. We don't know where interest rates are going. We will probably be over $1 million in the current budget year. And we think the Board of Finance should take an opportunity to look closely at that and maybe adjust that number. Building permits, we're leaving flat, and we're leaving it flat after after a significant ramp up over the past 4 years. In 2020, the revenue from the building department was $408,000. In 21, it was $716,000. In 2022, $876,000. In 23, $642,000. And 24's estimate is $840,000 to $850,000. So there may be some room there, but I think we've seen a leveling off in that. And that really goes to justify some of the additions we made and resources we added to the building department because the workload was there. Those permits, those increases came because the number of permits had increased so dramatically. And then I know Chairman Wilson will probably shoot me, but the fire department revenue we're thrilled to see is coming in over budget. And I know this is a conservative estimate of revenues for next year, but there may be a little wiggle room there as well for the Board of, based on where we are in the current fiscal year. Okay, next, please. This is the bad news slide. The good news was last year we had a wonderful increase in the grand list, right? And we accounted for most of that. This year, the growth in the grand list was 0.03%, which in talking to my peers around the state who had reval and at the same time in October of 2022, they are also seeing a flat increase in the next year. All right. Next slide. I'm done. Is that enough? Well, I told you the last time, my staff said I was much too long when I listened.
I was expecting another 15 minutes. Here we go. All right. Hold on, I gotta wake up. No, I'm kidding. So we will bring down a presentation and bring the audience back up from Zoom. I want to echo what I did say before. Mary Jane, thank you for addressing questions, really kind of at the 11th hour. by the board. Very much appreciate it. And I know you had a team, and I know quite a few of them are here. So thank you for that. I'm sure there'll be obviously other questions as we go on tonight and on Thursday, but thank you for putting that all in writing again. And I do again reiterate that there's a lot of reading here and a lot of questions, and there's a lot of work to it, but it does help when we do our deliberations and look at everything on Thursday. So thank you for that. Questions for our first selectman? Yes. Come on up, and I believe you know the routine, so. Thank you.
Christopher Brighton, I live at 20 Trailwood Drive here in Connecticut. What was the percent increase in the town budget from last year? Is it 2.99?
It's 2.99 in the total operating budget, which includes the operating, the retirement, and
Everything,
the capital.
the whole
Should be, yeah, you got it, Chris.
anything How much is being spent to keep the town computer system safe from hackers?
We are spending what we feel is appropriate. We have actually, I've just authorized our IT director to do another assessment, a penetration test and assessment. We are spending, and I think an adequate, more than adequate amount. I won't go into the complete details of the systems that we use, and nor will we talk about any potential insurance for attacking. But if you'd like to talk about that offline.
No, I just want to make sure we're spending appropriately.
Well, actually, where is he? Charles Havertid, the Board of Selectmen member, is always insistent that we're implementing the appropriate tools.
Rather pay
On the
now
front side,
than later.
yeah, ransomware, not so good.
Now, this question for both the Board of Ed. Do you, Mr. Hoey had said that they did a reduction when they looked through the budget, which is what I was used to when I had to make a budget. We'd have to go through there and sometimes reduce. Does the Board of Ed reduce?
Yes, there are actually two processes of reduction. Through the board, through the budget process that Dr. Freeman oversees, as each building principal is putting together a budget, as each department puts together a budget, those budgets are then reviewed by the administration and reductions are made. So when the Board of Ed receives the budget, we see what was asked and we see what the administration has already reduced. And then we deliberate. And in this case, we reduced it by another $261,000 before we voted on it and presented it to the Board of Finance.
So how much was the budget, the original budget, reduced to what you showed us today?
Again, the Board of Ed reduced the budget that was presented to us by $261,000.
Not million, just
Not
hundreds of
millions.
thousands.
No. And that's quite frankly, because the budget that is presented to us is so carefully crafted and efficiently constructed that we're not going to find a lot to reduce.
Could I just make a quick clarification? The term reduction is a form of art here. When I talk about reductions, it was reductions from what was requested by the department head.
Right.
Not, you,
That was
yeah,
very
okay,
clear.
I just wanted to make sure of that.
I work with budgets, big budgets. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Further questions? Board Finance.
Want me to go first, Mike?
Absolutely.
All right. I think I might have an easy one. It's not even really related to this budget that much. I keep wondering if we have anything left in the energy fund that we created many years back.
Yeah.
Got funded, I think, to the tune of about $1 million.
Right,
And then
we
we
have-
found projects.
Right, I think we have, what, 240,000 in the energy, is it 240?
Yeah.
It's an authorization to bond, it's not money that we're sitting on. It's an authorization to bond.
I believe I answered that question in I have the
You know, I did answer, but I didn't think it was the authorization to bond. And it dates back so far that I think we might be out of the money, but I think we already pulled $200,000 for 5 years in a row to create the fund. And then we used it to, I think, change the town hall to gas.
It's not a special fund, it's a bond authorization. So when I provide the capital list, the bonded capital list on a quarterly basis, those energy lines are part of there. So if we budget 300,000 or 200,000 in a specific bond authorization, it stays there. It doesn't get put into any special fund. So it stays there until we use it up. And as the Board of Selectmen review not only budgets on an ongoing basis, but even requests that come throughout the year, one of the first questions Matt will call me on is there any money left in energy? So we are always pulling from that money for appropriate uses. Remember, it's bonded money. It has to be appropriate uses for that line item.
239,190.
Thank you.
Close, huh?
Yeah.
I answered so many questions, I don't remember the number.
All right, I think I just have one more for tonight. I've been expressing concern over the last couple of years about the stop-loss premium, and you renegotiated. I did some back-of-the-envelope calculations over the last 5 years, and we haven't been doing that well. You know, if we didn't do it, which would be very risky not to do it, admittedly, we might have saved about $4 million. So it's a big deal, and I'm wondering, how much are the new premiums? I think we're paying about $1.4 million now. How much is the new negotiated premium?
Well, we haven't finalized, you mean for the 25 year, for the upcoming budget?
I don't know any of the details. I just
we-
know you've been working on.
Those numbers have not yet been finalized. We actually have a meeting on Thursday. I spoke to Joe Spurgeon just today. He's our consultant, you know, regarding stop loss and the entire medical budget. So we are hopeful that that number is even going to be lower for the upcoming year, but we do not have final numbers. But we're looking at that very closely. And as I've mentioned at the Board of Finance meetings, now that we have pulled stop loss out separately, we're able to negotiate that separately and find some additional savings.
Okay, maybe experience will improve. I mean, if we went back farther, we'd probably find a lot of benefit, because I've been told there are many years it worked well for us.
Correct.
But
For
the
many
last
years, it
four
was
were
the
not
thing
so
to do.
good.
And we're one bad claim away from using up our stop loss. So,
Okay.
as you said, not having the stop loss is not a smart thing to do. I mean, we need to have it. The only thing we can do is go by on our experience to how we're using it. So since our experience has been a little lower over the past few years, that's why we're seeing a reduction, and we're hoping to see another reduction in the 2025. This year, hopefully, maybe we'll have that number before we finalize. I'm not sure. We're not quite sure if we'll have that this Thursday. If not, then we'll most likely go with the budget that we have and, you know, adjust the amount that we put into the medical budget next year in the same way we did in the current year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Last call on Zoom?
There's a hand up.
Do I see a hand up?
Yes.
Sonia Marino.
Oh, no.
No, Clint Ham.
That's the
Clint
point.
Ham.
Tracy tricked us.
Good job. I fell for it.
At least we're paying attention.
Got excited.
Okay. Anybody in the audience? Any other questions? Okay.
Easy, you let me off easy.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr. Howick. Appreciate
We
it.
look forward to seeing you
We're
and
getting used
chatting
to
with
it.
you on Thursday.
Absolutely. Okay. Before we move into agenda item number 2, I'm going to take my glass off so I can actually read my scripted notes here to make sure it's all done quickly. We are going to go in a public forum in a second, but I would like to provide a brief recap of where we stand with the town and school budgets, the revenue projection, the anticipated mill rate, and bonding requests. And these are all as of right now that we will be discussing on Thursday. Town Board of Selectmen has requested an operating budget of $37,056,226, or a 3.85% increase over last year. The town debt service budget request of $10,166,847 is a reduction of basically less than $300, so it's statistically flat from last year. When you combine those two, as was mentioned, the town and debt service budget, the requested percentage budget increase is 2.99% over last year. The Board of Education's requests an operating budget of $72,157,151, or a 5.08% increase over last year. The total combined town and school budget request is $119,380,224, or a 4.25% increase over last fiscal year. On the revenue side, projected non-tax revenue will increase, or is proposed to increase, 2.57%, largely due to an expected increase in interest income. That's the largest component of it. Regarding the grand list, as we heard, and unlike last year's significant increase due to revaluation in the fall of 2022, the total net taxable grand list before adjustments by the Board of Assessment Appeals increased only 0.03%, and this slight increase will result in nearly no mill rate impact to the budgets presented. With the 2023 grand list figure, and based on the budgets and revenue projections presented tonight, we are currently at a projected mill rate that would go from 25.88 to 27.00, or a 4.32% increase from last year. We also heard about capital bond authorization requests, and the Board of Education is requesting an amount of $2,452,080 for 5 items that were reviewed: pipe and unit vent and oil tank replacement at Melissa Jones, tennis court replacement at Guilford Lakes, school repeaters at Guilford High School, Baldwin Middle School, and Adams Middle School, district-wide fiber install and infrastructure upgrades, and architectural and engineering services for future projects. On the town side, capital bond authorizations are made as a 2-year request, and this year is the off-cycle year, so there is no request this year. That is the recap. So at this time, I would like to move forward to agenda item 2 on our agenda, public forum, and ask anyone wishing to address the Board of Finance, raise your physical hand here in the audience or your virtual hand on Zoom to be unmuted, and please state your name, address, and limit your comments, if you can, please, to 3 minutes. Any comments in public forum? Going once. Going twice. Oh, okay. Thank you. Just a reminder that this, just so you know, this is public forum, so this will be comment. If you have questions, they won't be answered tonight, but we certainly will take them under consideration on Thursday, because the dialogue is closed, but this is the public forum portion, so please. Thank you.
Do I have to say my name again?
No, I think, you know what? You're good. You're good. You're good. Go ahead.
I'm Jack Jones. I just wanted to say that I think the town budget's fine, but I have concerns about the Board of Ed. With the number of students you have, it should be a lot lower, more like the towns, like 2.993.0. Last year, the budget went up again big time because of the school board budget. We had the reassessment. I had to pay 19% more, and it looks like that's going to go up even more. So I'd rather you keep it down based on the number of kids you got going to that school. You should be able to reduce. Everybody else has in the industries and healthcare and everywhere else. We've had to do more with less. So as thoughtful as you think it might be, I'm sure you can reduce your budget a lot more. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone further public forum? I'll do it again. Going once. I'll do it quicker. Twice. Okay. Before we adjourn, a last reminder that budget workshop number 1 will be held in the same hybrid format as tonight, in person in the same room and virtually by Zoom, on Thursday night, March 7th, again at 7:30 p.m. Public forum will be on the agenda before and after our workshop discussions. Should the Board of Finance not vote a budget forward to town meeting on Thursday night, due to any number of circumstances, a second budget workshop is scheduled, if needed, on Monday, March 11th, also at 7:30 p.m. in the same format as this evening. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for coming
Thank
out.
you.
Very
Thank
much
you.
appreciated.